Namaste, everyone. Good evening to all of you, and thank you for joining the final session of this FDP on IKS and introduction. For the past 5 days, it has been wonderful to have all of you together on this journey of getting acquainted with IKS and introducing ourselves to several aspects of IKS. And it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this last session. Before we begin the session, again on behalf of my team at NLD, Dr. Pradyuman sir, Dr. Pratibha Maitra, and Dr. Vikas Rajpopat, I would like to extend gratitude to our collaborating institution, St. Mary's College, Yusufguda, Hyderabad. Thank you to the organizing team, the patron of this FDP, Dr. Jaimol Cross, principal of the college, convener Dr. Soumya Kumar Madam, assistant professor, Department of English and Languages, and the coordinator of this FDP, Shima N. Madam, assistant professor, Department of Science. Thank you to the entire team, and we hope that in the future also we will get this opportunity to collaborate with your institution for conducting such fruitful programs. Just a few instructions for all our participants. Since today is the final day of the FDP, when we are about to close the session, I will be sharing a feedback form in the chat box. So all of you are requested to fill the feedback form, or you can also copy paste the link for your reference. And I will also be posting the feedback form link and some instructions for certificate distribution in the WhatsApp group after we close the session today. So please kindly give us a time of a week to 10 days for us to send the certificates to you. And in case you have any queries regarding the same, you can always reach out to the number given in that message. And that you will also, of course, continue to join future programs at NLD. In yesterday's session, because of the constraints of time, we were not able to address one question. I think the question was posed by Dr. It was posed by Dr. Srinath Naganathan sir. So when we open the forum for discussion and questions, we will take sir's question first. So with this, let us start today's session. And today's session is focused on understanding the characteristics and understanding the attributes of India's civilizational discourse and India's knowledge system. So like yesterday, I would like to begin with another short video by Professor Kapil Kapoor, where he's discussing about the central concern of the Indic knowledge system. What is something that defines Indian knowledge system? And a lot of times people may ask us, what is Indian knowledge system? So I think a very simple and effective definition of Indian knowledge system has been given by Professor Gauri Mahulikar. She says that the entire body of knowledge systems and philosophical frameworks that emanate from India, that are derived from the land of Bharat, comprise what we call Indian knowledge system. So entire knowledge body, philosophical frameworks emerging from Bharat constitute or can be called Indian knowledge systems. And of course, in yesterday's session, we did see how these three terms, Indian knowledge and systems, are being defined and explained by Professor B. Mahadevan. So again, I will take you to a short video. Let us go there. Okay. I hope my screen is visible. Just please help me with some confirmation. I think it is. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Srinath.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Great. So, in this video, Professor Kapoor is discussing the central concern of Indian thoughts. And he says that the central focal point of Indian thought, or IKS, is the welfare, well-being, and happiness of all life forms. So Indian thought is not just concerned about welfare, happiness, and well-being of the human life form, but of all life forms. So let's listen to what he's saying.
We have a compendium of Western Indian philosophy in 13th century, Madhvacharya, 16 systems of thought. So if you read through, you find the central concern is happiness, the welfare of life, jiva, or jiva. We are taught human rights and, told about human rights. But, our culture is worried about the rights of all jiva, all life forms. You have our ladies, feeding birds, feeding ants, cooking for the dogs, cooking for the animals, sharing with all forms of life. And therefore, our whole knowledge culture is devoted to welfare of life forms. We have a compendium.
Okay, great. So I hope that message was very, very effective and powerful, that Indian knowledge systems are concerned about the happiness, welfare, and well-being of not just the human life form, but of all life forms. And that is how we see respect for animals, respect for environment, respect for nature in all our traditions and festivals. And yesterday, when I was discussing what is core to being an Indian, how do we define our identity as an Indian? Knowledge is at the center of Indian civilization. We are a civilization, we are a culture of ideas. And despite the many troubles that our civilization has encountered, for example, we encountered loot, we encountered invasions, we encountered colonial rule, and we encountered the destruction and pillage of our learning centers. We all know about the story of the burning of Nalanda and Takshashila, where so much of knowledge was stored in their libraries and it was burnt down. And it is said that the burning of these libraries also took a number of days. There was so much of knowledge stored. But despite all this destruction that our knowledge system had to encounter, we were still able to somehow preserve our knowledge through oral traditions, because through the Guru Shishya Parampara, we were able to pass on our knowledge from one mind to the other. So knowledge is at the center of Bharatiya civilization. And if all of you have heard about the National Manuscript Mission, there is a humongous Herculean effort that the government of India is undertaking to preserve these manuscripts, to bring out manuscripts from different parts of the country, and to trying and finding out what knowledge is stored in these manuscripts. And I think millions of manuscripts are still waiting to be translated. In fact, in my own university here in Baroda, we have the Oriental Institute, and there the preservation of these manuscripts is being undertaken. Research on these manuscripts is being undertaken, and the government is on a mission to find out and discover more and more manuscripts. So the central point of Bharatiya civilization has always been knowledge, be it in our oral traditions, be it in our knowledge texts, and knowledge becomes the defining feature of Bharatiya civilization. And I did share with you what my professor told me when I put to him the question. That is the title of Professor S.N. Balgangadhara's book, which I shared with all of you in the group yesterday. What does it mean to be an Indian? So in the Bharatiya context, we are seekers of knowledge. We are seekers of truth, and we are open to multiple truths. We are open to multiple ideas. We are open to multiple interpretations, diverse understandings of the same topic. And a good example is our Shaddarshanas, where we have 6 schools of philosophy, uh, one uh, uh, one category of Indian philosophy believes in the authority of the Vedic corpus, the other completely rejects the authority of the Vedic corpus. Still, they are under one umbrella in the Bharatiya fold. So, knowledge and the pursuit of knowledge is what drives Indians and Indian civilization. And knowledge is not meant to control, knowledge is not meant to overpower, knowledge is not meant to serve selfish interests. Knowledge is meant to be used for the welfare, happiness, and well being of everyone. Knowledge is meant to liberate oneself from material desires, and knowledge is used to purify oneself. So, how Western philosophy and Western knowledge systems look at knowledge versus how we look at knowledge is very, very different. And that is one defining characteristic of Indian knowledge systems. In fact, we can look at our civilizational discourse in 3 ways. We pursue knowledge, we pursue bhakti, we pursue action. So we have the jnana path, we have the karma path, and we also have the bhakti path. And probably we are free to choose the path that we feel is the best for us. So as teachers, as educators, we have chosen the jnana path. Those who are engaged in rituals, devotion, and the study of religious scriptures, they have chosen the bhakti path. Some may have chosen the path of karma or action. So these are some aspects that we must keep in mind when we try to understand our own civilization and try to understand what characteristics define us. So let's come to today's presentation, and it's a very short one because I'm going to focus on some core attributes of our civilizational discourse. One of the major one characteristic we have already discussed about, that Bharatiya civilization is a knowledge-centric civilization. It is a civilization of ideas. It emphasizes on ideas. And if you look at our civilizational history, and yesterday we had the opportunity to discuss the IKS corpus, and that should have made it very, very clear to all of us that as a civilization, as people, as a nation, we have been able to still maintain a large body of knowledge, lot of which is authentic. We are preserving it. Now we are trying to understand it much better. So there is emphasis on ideas and knowledge in Bharatiya civilization, and knowledge is not restricted, or knowledge is not interpreted in only one way. There is no dictum to understand knowledge. There is freedom. There is diversity. So you can have contrasting ideas, you can have debates, you can have discussion. So lot of our texts, they may contradict what they are saying about a particular concept, about a particular idea, but they're still part of that continuous, unbroken, linked tradition. So our focus is on knowledge. That is a very important attribute of our civilizational discourse. The second important aspect that we must remember is that Bharat has been a knowledge civilization that primarily survived on oral traditions. So why these oral traditions are very, very unique. And yesterday also, as part of the IKS corpus, we saw that oral traditions are a very, very important part of the corpus. So of course, later on in our civilization, there were and now there are efforts to document our knowledge traditions, but primarily we relied on the Shruti Smriti Parampara, which means knowledge was either revealed or it was heard, and then it was committed to one's memory, and then it was transferred from one generation to another. So oral tradition means that you share your beliefs, ideas, value systems, cultures, etc., traditions by word of mouth. And yesterday, I think one participant gave examples of Burra Katha and some other storytelling traditions. So all these traditions survived by word of mouth. They were not documented systematically. And when we talk about an oral tradition, why it is very, very unique. Let's take a very simple example. When we try to write something, we have the scope to elaborate. We have the scope to detail it out. But when we have to speak something or share something through word of mouth, we have to be very specific. We have to be very, very concise and to the point, right? We have to explain our worldview to the other. So, for example, you do a PhD and you document your PhD in about 300 pages, and out of your PhD thesis, you pull out 3 or 4 research papers. One research paper focuses on your methods. One research paper focuses on review of literature. The other focuses on results, etc. So when you write down something in the written tradition, you can elaborate, you can detail out, and you can devote one document to one specific idea or concept. Uh, so I can have one textbook on philosophy, another textbook on grammar, the third textbook on aesthetics, etc. But if I ask you to present your PhD thesis orally in an oral presentation or in a poster presentation, you will only have 10 minutes to do so. And you'll have to present your entire PhD thesis in 10-12 minutes. In fact, in different parts of the world, there are such competitions where you have to present your thesis or research results in short time orally. So when we have oral tradition, you use stories, you use songs, you use poetry, okay? You explain your culture, history, tradition, your worldview in an oral form, and that is where you can't separate, you can't categorize, you have to bring everything together. All knowledge body is comprised in one tradition, and that is why it has to be very, very specific, concise, and precise. So this is the unique characteristic of Indian knowledge systems, as also I believe other indigenous civilizations, because knowledge had to be committed to your memory. You had to transmit. If you were a guru, you would have the responsibility to transmit knowledge to the next generation. So you would have to remember it, and there were certain techniques of remembering it, memorization techniques, patha techniques, etc. So there is an advantage also with oral traditions. Of course, there are some limitations also. So in the oral tradition, you can't have separate works for different topics. You have to put everything together in one work. For example, if we look at Manusmriti, Manusmriti has ideas and knowledge about public administration, but it also has knowledge on dharmic living, right? Similarly, if we look at Sulbha Sutra, there is knowledge contained about mathematics, but there is also knowledge about ethical code of conduct. If we talk about several Buddhist texts, which are also part of the larger Indic framework, you have knowledge and discussions on philosophy, but you also have knowledge on mathematics. If you, for example, look at Brihad Samhita, it is talking about astronomy and mathematics, but it is also talking about several other topics. And there are many, many examples of text, oral traditions from the IKS repository, where one repository combines several topics. So IKS is very, very multidimensional. You can explore one topic from different perspectives. And of course, how did it happen? It happened through the Guru Shishya Parampara. The Guru was responsible for training his or her students into that particular Parampara and transferring that knowledge to the Shishyas. And of course, the Shishya had complete faith and complete surrender to the Guru. And that is how the Shishya was integrated in that parampara. And of course, we see this in many examples of dialogues and discussions happening between the Guru and the Shishya. And we also know the rigorous kind of examinations that the Shishya would have to go through before they would complete their education in the Gurukul. Today, of course, in our modern education system, which is inspired by the West, we have categories, we have compartments, we have disciplines. So I am in the Department of Political Science and you are probably in the Department of English. Of course, now with the introduction of NEP 2020, we are talking about bridging those disciplinary barriers. We are talking about interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary work and research, but this was already happening in the way Indian education took place. And I would recommend a very beautiful work by Sri Dharampal, The Beautiful Tree. If any of you would like to explore ancient Indian education, this is a good book to begin with. This is an account of ancient Indian education, and these accounts have been put together by Sri Dharampal based on the accounts of colonial officers when the British came to India. And when they observed our education system, they made certain reports, especially in the Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay presidency. And Sri Dharampal studied all these reports and he compiled it in the form of a book, The Beautiful Tree, which explains how before colonial education, what kind of education system did we have. So you can see oral traditions are very, very important to Bharatiya civilization, and even today our oral traditions are alive. They may be struggling to survive, but they are still alive. And again, I would just urge you to go and have a look at the list of winners of the Padma Awards over the last 10 years, and you will find that many of these awardees they have preserved some or the other art form, dance form, music form, craft form, or some ancient tradition which is on the verge of extinction. So it is in the hinterlands of India that we see these oral traditions alive. And in my work with the Rathwa community in the tribal belt of Gujarat, I was actually able to witness in real time how the tribal community has still preserved their storytelling tradition. So Western knowledge systems believed in documentation. So if you ever get an opportunity to travel to the West, see that they were very good at documentation. They preserved archives, libraries, and museums very well. And this is something that we should definitely appreciate about them. But as I have put a quote on the slide, our civilization was always more about oral transmission of knowledge and examining knowledge from a multidimensional perspective. So that becomes a very, very important characteristic of Indian knowledge system. Another characteristic before we can move on to the next one is that we are a tradition that is evolving. So we have a dynamic tradition, but we're also a continuing tradition. There is no disruption, there is no break. And yesterday I did share the example of Chhat Puja to just demonstrate how it's a very continuous, timeless tradition going on from time immemorial. So how did this happen, right? So it's a long tradition. It's a linked tradition of texts and thinkers, which means it is cumulative, it is continuous, it is unbroken despite the several challenges and ruptures that we have faced. This happened because when our thinkers were putting together our knowledge system, they did not do so in vacuum. They did not take this knowledge exercise in isolation. They always referred to what was done previous to them. What did the scholars and the thinkers earlier than them do? and then they would carry forward their work. And isn't this something that we do in review of literature today? Okay, when we do our research work, we always look at what previous researchers have done, what previous scholars have contributed, what is the academic discourse in our discipline. This is what Indian knowledge system also did so well. So any scholar or thinker who would put together a text, they would not do it by ignoring what was done earlier. They would always give credit to the earlier scholar, earlier thinker. They would always acknowledge, and then they would put forward what they had to as a continuing tradition. So, you know, in the Bharatiya Parampara, you have the main text or the authoritative text, and there are texts before it and there are texts after it, or traditions before it and traditions after it. So, for example, Panini, the very well-known grammarian who put together Ashtadhyayi, the corpus of Sanskrit grammar rules and regulation, he gives credit to the scholars who have worked before him in the grammar tradition of Sanskrit, right, preceding to him. So there is a long tradition before him. He acknowledges that, and then he puts forward his work. And after that particular work is done, there are tikas, there are commentaries, that there are interpretations and discussions on the work. So you see how our tradition is not divided into compartments. It is a linked tradition. It is a tradition that is continuing, and it is also a tradition that keeps evolving. So if I write a text today, you would be free to reject it tomorrow and come up with your own knowledge ideas, rejecting my text. And this dialogue we see very beautifully in our Shadadarshans. When we look at Nyaya, Vaisheshik, Yoga, Sankhya, Bauddha, Jain, Charvak traditions, Purva and Uttar Mimamsa, we see there is a continuous dialogue between our philosophical traditions. They may not agree with each other, but they are not outrightly rejecting each other. They have their differences of opinion, they have their disagreements, but they are able to survive together. Okay, they are able to be together as part of the larger holistic IKS repository. So this is also a very, very important characteristic of Bharatiya Gyan Parampara. And there is also the element of faith or belief. So if for example, if I'm trained in a particular classical dance or classical music parampara, then I'm part of that parampara. Then it becomes my responsibility. If I am trained in Hindustani classical music, then I am carrying forward that parampara. You would always have observed, if you have ever attended music or dance programs, the artist will always share what parampara, gharana do they belong to, and they will always acknowledge their guru. No Indian artist who is into the traditional art and dance and music forms, they won't begin their programs without acknowledging the guru, because they acknowledge that this is a tradition that they are carrying forward, and it's only and only possible because of the guru. They've learned it from the guru, and their responsibility is just to carry it forward. They don't become the owners of that tradition. They are part of that tradition. Another important characteristic that we would now want to look at is that one single knowledge repository addresses different aspects of life in IKS. You have the dharmic dimension, and again, we know by dharma, we don't mean religion, we mean duty, we mean the right thing to do. So one work can address multiple dimensions. You can have ethical dimensions being addressed. You can have the philosophical dimensions being addressed. So you can ask very complex questions about life, like who am I? Why am I on this earth? What is the purpose of my life? What is the final destination of my life? What is my relationship with my near and dear ones? What is the meaning of death? Etc., etc. Right? You can ask these questions. You can explore the nature of reality. You can explore both your internal self as well as the external world. Then you also have spiritual dimensions being addressed in IKS, and then you have practical, applied, and material dimensions, right? Yesterday we looked at Vedic corpus, Vedanga, Upaved, we looked at Upanga. So we know that the Vedic corpus presents the larger spiritual dharmic dimension, but the Upavedas, the Upangas, the Vedangas, they all represent the practical and applied dimension of our knowledge system. And for this, there is a very good example that has been shared by Professor Mahadevan, and I would now like you to take all of you to it. Okay, just put on my charger. Yeah. So the Bhagavad Gita, this is one example. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, I hope I am audible. Just a moment. Yeah, sorry, there is some issue with my laptop. Yeah. Sorry. Hello, am I audible to everyone?
Hello.
Hello.
Am I audible to everyone? Can someone confirm? Yeah, okay, there is some issue with my laptop. So please give me some time. I have to exit the page from my laptop and rejoin it. So let me just try and rejoin. But let's continue. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I think my laptop was stuck on some screen. So that is why I was trying to sort that problem out for a moment, but I believe now it's okay. Okay. And that is why I was also not able to share my screen. Okay. So a very good example of how IKS has a very multi-dimensional, multifaceted approach is the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita, as we all know very well,
we can hear
it's
two
a text
voices.
that is admired and followed not just in the Indian subcontinent, but the world over as a philosophical text, as a text from which we can derive spiritual lessons. We worship this text as a religious text, and we also have practical application and practical implementation of this text. In fact, Professor Mahadevan, when he was with IIM Bengaluru, he ran a very successful course on management lessons from the Bhagavad Gita, and management gurus and corporate organizations all over the world, they have used the Bhagavad Gita in different ways. So the Bhagavad Gita is a very good example of how our knowledge tradition is not unidimensional. The same text or the same tradition can explore a religious perspective, a spiritual perspective, and a very practical, material, worldly perspective. So we will now listen to one shlok from chapter 4, rather two shloks from chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, that is Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. And this example is sufficient enough to demonstrate that Sitting here, I may look at the Bhagavad Gita as a spiritual text. Somebody else may look at it as a divine religious text, word of God, etc. Some third person may completely ignore the spiritual and the religious element, and he or she may use Bhagavad Gita in his or her everyday life. So that is the example that we need to understand. So we will go to chapter 4. Let me see if the audio tab is being shared. Okay, so you will listen a shlok, okay, and then on the page you can read the translation and the commentary very quickly. So let's go ahead. So chapter 4, we will first listen to verse number 7, and this is a very good website if you want to listen to the correct pronunciation of the shlok and want to also understand the translation, as well as there is a commentary given. So you can read the translation and the commentary. So this is verse number
audio
7.
is on both the devices.
Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham.
Okay, so we'll just hear it one more time.
Yada yada hi dharmasya ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानमधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम्.
Okay, now let's go to shlok number 8.
परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृताम् धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे.
Great. So you see verse number 7, the translation is that wherever there is a decline in righteousness and an increase in unrighteousness, O Arjun, at that time I will manifest myself on the earth. Right? Krishna saying to Lord Krishna, Bhagwan Krishna saying to Arjun. The translation for shlok 8 is to protect the righteous, to annihilate, that is to destroy the wicked and the evil, to re-establish the principles of dharma. I appear on this stage, on this earth, age after age. So if we look at this two shlokas and understand the commentary, we understand that whenever there is increase in evil, unrighteousness, whenever the adharmic forces increase, Bhagavan will descend in the world in the form of an avatar Purush, and he will take this avatar to destroy the evil, to protect dharma, to re-establish dharma. That is what is the concept of avatar Purush. Now, this is from a religious sense or a spiritual sense. But if we want to understand this from a very materialistic, everyday sense, we can look at systems. We can look at organizations. So whenever there is an increase in evil, whenever the system collapses, whenever the system is in disequilibrium, there are some regenerative points in the system which can bring back the system to some kind of stability and prevent it from perishing. And this is applicable in life. This is applicable to communities. This is applicable to groups. This is applicable to organizations. This is applicable to systems which human beings have created in this world. So all systems, they have some points which can be called as regenerative points. And when the system itself is under threat, when there are some negative, unstable, difficult points in the system which can lead the system to think, these regenerative points can help the system to re-energize, refurbish, reoperate. Okay, so this interpretation or this kind of understanding can also be derived from different traditions of Indian knowledge system, and that is why we have to emphasize that we are not looking at only the religious or the spiritual dimension, but we are looking at ethical dimensions, material dimensions when we explore Indian knowledge systems. And since Bhagavad Gita is such a popular text, which people all over the world, irrespective of their religious affiliation, like to read and understand, and they've also appreciated it. So we understand that IKS is very, very varied. It doesn't restrict to one kind of perspective. It addresses multiple perspectives. It depends on the seeker here, that is us, what we want to derive out of it. So to kind of reiterate what are the attributes of Indian knowledge system before we move on to the final aspect of our session, we acknowledge that Indian knowledge system is holistic, which means that our knowledge system is not interested in understanding the world in some separate boxes. We are not interested in understanding parts or categories. We want to understand the whole. We look at human existence in a very holistic way. And a good example of this is our practice and philosophy of yoga. So today, of course, we understand and associate yoga with asanas and body postures. But we know that yoga is not just limited to physical well-being. Physical well-being is an outcome of yoga practice, but yoga is connected to all kinds of well-beings, your inner well-being, social well-being, mental well-being, intellectual well-being, spiritual well-being, etc. So our philosophy, our way of understanding the world is that we want to understand human existence in entirety. We want to focus on all aspects, not just on one aspect, and that is how our knowledge system is interconnected. Different domains in our knowledge systems are interconnected. A very good example of this is Bhaskaracharya's Lilavati. Bhaskaracharya was a very well-known ancient Indian mathematician, and he was known to contribute to algebra, geometry, calculus. He had a daughter named Lilavati, and there is a very interesting episode on Upanishad Ganga on his and his daughter's life. And he explains complex mathematical equations in a very interesting way. He uses puzzles, he uses stories, he uses structured verses to talk about mathematical concepts. So Lilavati is a text about mathematics, and I'll try to show a video to you about it in the end. We may not be from the mathematics background, but I still feel we can appreciate the interconnectedness of different domains and different aspects of life. So today, if I'm doing mathematics, I can't isolate myself from social sciences, okay? Or if I'm doing social sciences, I also need to appreciate the knowledge being generated in pure and applied sciences. So interconnectedness of knowledge, interconnectedness of disciplines, understanding knowledge in an integrated way. That is an important characteristic of Indian knowledge system, and I'm glad that with NEP we have brought it back. Otherwise, we know the rigidity of disciplines that existed in our universities. If you're doing history, you're only doing history. If you're doing English literature, you're only doing English literature. If you're in fine arts, you're only doing that. But we know, for example, somebody from fine arts also needs to appreciate history, needs to appreciate literature, also probably needs to appreciate some technical aspects of their art form. So this integration of knowledge, which unfortunately was challenged by Western and colonial education system, now with NEP we have brought it back. You can be specializing in one discipline, but the spirit of IKS tells you that you can truly appreciate your knowledge systems when you understand it and explore it in an integrated fashion. Also, we can think of IKS as a decoding process. When we make an effort to decode and understand what our ancestors contributed, what they were trying to tell us about life. So we can think of IKS as culture-centric decoding of messages. So the knowledge material that we explore in IKS, it may not be simple. You may have to read one verse twice, thrice, 5 times. Today, if I read the Bhagavad Gita once, I may have one understanding. If I read it the second time or the third time, I may have a different understanding, because knowledge in IKS has a lot of layers. We have to keep peeling off these layers. So it's not very straightforward. It's intricate, it's complex, and we have to be trained to understand it and decipher it. And for that, we need to appreciate our culture. And it is also ever evolving. Knowledge is not stuck in some kind of time warp in IKS. It is continuously evolving. It is dynamic. It is being challenged. New knowledge is being generated. And that is how our knowledge traditions have survived so far. The last part that we will discuss before we kind of sum up and try to understand what are the characteristics of our knowledge systems. And I definitely encourage you to compare it with Western knowledge systems and Western philosophy, because most of us have probably had the opportunity to learn Western philosophy and delve ourselves into Western knowledge systems. And there's no harm in learning about another knowledge system, trying to understand what it has to offer, comparing it with our own, and then taking the best of both worlds. We are not completely rejecting Western knowledge systems. Of course, what works for them doesn't work for us, because we are in a different context, we're in a different culture, and we are different people. Another important characteristic of Bharatiya knowledge civilization is the way it was put forward, the way it was presented. And I will just take you again to the slide on oral traditions. So how, because we are primarily an oral tradition, knowledge had to be committed to the memory, and then it had to be transferred to the next generation. So a certain style and manner of presentation was required. So knowledge had to be very, very structured, concise, precise, to the point. And why? Because primarily we were an oral tradition. Of course, as we have gained access to different forms of media, we have gained access to different forms of documentation. Now our knowledge system also has a lot of documentary repositories. But because we were primarily an oral tradition, we followed a very systematic style of presentation with a defined format. So you will see verses, you will see encryptions in the form of sutras, which are in 2 lines, which are in 4 lines, and the meaning, the message, the knowledge is conveyed in these 2, 4, 6 lines. So it is very, very concise. And my friend, who is a Sanskrit grammarian from the Paninian tradition, and she has done some wonderful work on Paninian grammar and computational linguistics. The first thing that she told us when we were understanding about Paninian grammar was that Panini says that if you have to convey something, it is best conveyed in a short, precise way. Today, I was speaking to my mother, and she was telling me about Korean language. And she said that when the Korean language was brought forth, they had only 24 words, because they also believed that you have to convey more and effective using less number of words. So you see the similarities that we may share with other indigenous traditions, right? So because we were an oral tradition, our knowledge was constituted in concise ways in the form of sutras, in the form of verses. So this was irrespective of what subject the knowledge was in, and this was also whether irrespective of whether the work was original or a follow-up work or a commentary, etc. So there is, and because currently I'm enrolled in a course where I'm learning Sanskrit, our teacher keeps on correcting us that you have to pronounce correctly. You have to put emphasis on this word. Okay, this has to be pronounced in this particular way. So how to pronounce, where you have to put emphasis, the repetition of the sound, the rhythm, the rhyme, etc. So you had the use of minimum words and syllables. Because the purpose was very, very clear, you had to communicate knowledge and you have to communicate the message and the complex ideas using concise communication. And for this, there were several techniques that our ancient scholars employed. One is the mnemonic technique, which is a learning technique that facilitates information retention or retrieval in human memory. So it helps us to retrieve information within us and also reproduce it. And there were also different partner techniques. So you had to know the permutations and combinations. You had to be equipped in these techniques so that you could retain this knowledge and then also correctly pass it on to the next generation. And a good example is, a good example are these mathematical equations where there is a verse, and when you decode it, you have a complex mathematical formula or a complex mathematical equation. I think a good example is how in one verse, the value of pi is being decoded. So I'll just read it out for you. Chaturadhikam shatamashtagunam dvashashti stha sahasranam ayuddvaya vishkambha sya sanno Vritta Parinaha. I apologize for any error in pronunciation. So this verse computes the value of pi. So you just need this clear, concise, systematic, to the point, metrical, mnemonic technique with just 2 verses to understand that this is the value of pi. So just to round up, what are the salient aspects of Bharatiya civilization? I think what I wanted to convey is very well conveyed in the shlok that I have put up. Ano bhadraha kritvo yantu vikshataha. We are a knowledge civilization and we are open to receiving knowledge, sharing knowledge, not just receiving, but also sharing knowledge from any direction that it comes to us. We can gain knowledge from scholars, thinkers, but probably, as I told you yesterday, my grandmother, who's not very educated, she is also a source of knowledge in the Bharatiya tradition because she's the custodian of that tradition. She may not have had formal education. She may also not know how to read and write. She may not have a PhD like me. That's perfectly fine. But she is a source of knowledge for me because she has played a huge role in preserving the traditions that I follow today. So she becomes the custodian of that oral tradition. So IKS is holistic. It is interconnected. It is rooted in our ancient wisdom. It believes in the integration and bringing together of knowledge in different domains and dimensions. No one domain is superior, no one domain is lesser. To understand human existence in IKS, you need to respect the different aspects of life. You need to understand knowledge in a holistic form and not in parts or not in an isolated way. And this is how education in our own mother language helps us. And if you look at East Asia, China, Japan, Korea, etc., these are countries where education is still imparted in their mother language. When you have education in your mother language, you turn out to be a more confident person where you can appreciate all these aspects. Unfortunately, we have been educated in a foreign language. Uh, and I was just imagining would I be a different person if my education was done in my mother language, either Gujarati or Marathi. Okay. IKS also exemplifies integration of different concepts. So understanding concepts like dharma, karma, yoga, vivek, buddhi, nishtha, etc. It cannot be in parts. It cannot be done in parts. It has to be done holistically. And of course, IKS emphasizes on diversity of ideas, and that is how we as a civilization were so open to ideas from other civilizations also. And we were so magnanimous to give away and share our ideas with other civilizations. We did not claim any ownership that this is ours. And when we talk about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, right? We really mean it. Of course, in a very cultural and time-bound context, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam meant something else. Today, it probably means something else. But our civilization really thought of the world as one family. Or when we pray, we pray not just for the well-being of our people, we pray for the well-being of the world. We pray for the well-being of all life forms. So that emphasizes how ethical living and commitment to traditional practices, sustainable practices. We know that our civilization thinks of the river, trees, and other forms of nature as divine. So we have so many examples of sustainability and environmental friendly practices in our civilization. We emphasized a teaching learning approach through the Guru Shishya Parampara, where there was mutual exchange of knowledge, where the Shishya could question the Guru and the Guru would provide answers, and the Guru would just be a facilitator for the Shishya to go ahead and explore their path of learning on their own. Of course, IKS doesn't remain limited to India. It has now gained global acceptance. We are now also incorporating modern achievements of our civilization. It is all today, for example, there's so much discussion and debate on language, but look at the multiple kind of languages that IKS embodies. And I'll just share an anecdote. I was on Mumbai airport, I think 5 or 6 years ago, and I happened to meet a Belgian lady. She was traveling around India and we happened to strike a conversation. And she said she was amazed by the diversity of languages in India. And then I told her that every few kilometers, languages and dialect is changing. And she said, you're still able to live so harmoniously with so much of linguistic diversity. Whereas about her home country, Belgium, she said they had 3 languages and they had a hard time reconciling differences between people who spoke these 3 languages. So sometimes we can't appreciate what our knowledge system gives us unless somebody from outside comes and helps us realize that we really have a lot to appreciate and be happy about. So these were some aspects of the attributes and the characteristics of our civilizational discourse, and I prefer to call it a discourse because it really gives you life lessons. It really gives you some path and some framework to lead your life, to manage your life and fulfill the ultimate purpose of life, that is happiness. Yeah, I just read the chat box messages. Sorry for that little bit of disturbance and echo in between. I was just trying to manage between 2 devices. So great. Thank you so much. I hope that some of the insights that I was able to share with all of you through this session were useful, and as explorers, we will continue to explore IKS within our capacity, within our means, within our limitations, and we can still do that. And I think we are at a very good point in our lives where at least we are exposed to our knowledge systems and we are able to take it to young minds in the classroom. Thank you so much. Okay, are you talking about the feedback form link, Dr. Srinath sir? Okay, don't worry if the link is not working. Please do not worry. I will rectify the link and put it in the WhatsApp group. Let me just quickly check if it is working or not. If it doesn't work, maybe there is some issue. For me, it's working. I can open it on my screen. I can just share it with you, but no need to worry if it's not working. I just put it and it's there on my screen. You can just see it, but not to worry. Okay, I'm just sharing the website from which we were able to hear the Bhagavad Gita shlok. Yeah, no worries. The link thing will be sorted out. Okay. So let's take up Dr. Srinath's question since we were not able to take it today. So I will just read out sir's question for all of us because I copy pasted it for reference. So sir was asking that he's from the field of biotechnology. And the question is whether to understand the concept of IKS, whether we are learning, understanding the Ved and their branches as is taught in the Veda Pathshalas, where it starts with Shiksha, then going to Ved, Ramayana, Puran, Mahabharat, or are we transliterating directly to English and not reading between the lines and jumping to Ved, Mahabharat? Great question. Thank you for that question, Srinath sir. So if you ask me about the present context, especially the academic and the higher education context, we are doing the second thing. We don't have the scope or the time or the environment to kind of go through that traditional system of learning our knowledge sources. So what we are doing is we are kind of learning the basics. We are learning the core aspects using English, but also using sources which are true to our knowledge system. So we are not, and I'm just speaking as a group, that we are not using any source that we like. We are using sources either by traditional scholars who know Sanskrit and then who have translated it into English or other languages, or we are relying on scholars who may have worked in English, but they have sufficient, adequate knowledge of our traditional system. That is what we are doing. But in our country today, there are Veda Pathshalas, there are Vedic Gurukuls. In fact, one of my very close friends has just, he just pulled his daughter out of a traditional modern school and he put her into a traditional Gurukul setup where she's being taught all the subjects, science, history, mathematics, English, etc. But she's also being trained in our traditional knowledge. So of course, if we do have the opportunity to do that, we can do that, right? For example, I thought that it was very, very important for me to learn Sanskrit, the basics of spoken Sanskrit and Sanskrit grammar, to better appreciate Indian knowledge systems. I may not become an expert. I may not have the expertise that a traditional scholar may have because they have undergone a very different kind of a training. But I can at least try to get myself as close as possible to my knowledge system, right? So right now what we are doing is the second part. We are looking at sources which are closest and authentic to our knowledge system, but we also have to be very, very careful in which authors, which sources we are following, because a lot of because there's been a lot of appropriation and misuse of our knowledge system, so we should not end up using those kind of sources. So we are doing the other thing, but we are doing it because we are encountering many limitations in terms of pursuing ICAS. There are opportunities in terms of pursuing ICAS, but there are also limitations. So gradually now the government is also trying to bring in traditional scholars in the mainstream university system. So if my department tomorrow has a traditional Indian knowledge system scholar, then I'll be better equipped to pursue it. Today, I don't have it. The infrastructure is limited. IKS is still being gradually integrated into the mainstream education system. So it may take some time for us to do what you mentioned as the first way to do it. I hope that answered your question in some way, Dr. Srinath sir. Yes, multidisciplinary approach to understand the subject. Yes, Pallavi ma'am, absolutely. We appreciate multidisciplinarity now. For example, my university, it's always been a Meru University, MERU, Multidisciplinary Education Research University. But that aspect of multidisciplinarity was already there in IKS. If we had followed our traditional education and traditional knowledge system, we wouldn't have to go back to what we were already doing at one point in time. Yes. Anybody, if you want to give any feedback, suggestion, questions, want to share any resources, please go ahead. Currently, I'm reading this good book. I already shared some books with you in the WhatsApp group. So if you can find time to read it, that will be great. So currently, I'm just about to finish this book by Professor Subhash Kak. He's a professor of science and technology based in the US, and this book, Idea of India, Bharat as a Civilization, I think anytime you want to read it, it's great. He's talking about many aspects in this book at the moment. So he's talking about yoga, Veda. He's talking about the similarities that we share with other civilizations like the Yazidi civilization. He's talking about the brief history of Indian science and Sanskrit in regions beyond India. So just if you're interested, you can also read this book. Yes, Pallavi ji, I will coordinate with my admin team, and when we share the certificates and reading material with all of you, we will try to also put in our PPTs. I will have to consult with Dr. Pratibha and Dr. Vikas for that, but you'll definitely get reading material which you can use in your classroom. Yeah, हम feedback link जरूर WhatsApp group में share कर देंगे. Okay, Dr. Srinath, my doubt is if we are using the transliteration, then the timeline based on the British, like the distorted Mahabharat, but okay, but it was archaeologically astronomic, which proved that it happened. Okay, the same thing. My suggestion is to encourage more Vedic scholars and IKS researchers merge and propose for sessions. Yes, absolutely. You are absolutely right, Dr. Srinath, no doubt about it. And that is one of the limitations of oral traditions, and that is also the limitation of ancient indigenous civilizations. If you speak to anybody who's part of these ancient indigenous practices, they will tell you that things have changed, things are working differently. They will tell you that. For example, when I spoke to the storytellers in the tribal areas, there is one version of story in one region and there is another version of story in the other region, and both of them think that theirs is the correct version. So these kind of aspects will always be there, because I think we have to understand that we have been such a long civilization. So to actually preserve our knowledge as it was completely without any distortion, it's difficult. It's a challenge. But of course, what we can definitely try to do is continue to do research, continue to pursue IKS, continue to take it to the world. It's also important to take it to the outside world. Otherwise, they would use it, they would appropriate it, and then they would claim it as their own. So we don't want that to happen. But you are absolutely right that we need some kind of interface between traditional scholars and modern educators so that both can appreciate. Even the traditional scholars need to be trained in modern classroom teaching and modern educators, and I'm not using the modern in some superior sense. Those like us who have been trained in a different education system, we can appreciate what they bring to us. Same like we all talking about industry academia exchange, right? We talk about it in NAC, IQAC, NIRF frameworks. We're always talking about industry academia interface. Similar interface we need between traditional scholars and scholars who are in mainstream university teaching, unless and until we completely do an overhaul of the system like a Vedic or Gurukul system, which is going to take time. So it's best to integrate IKS in the way we are working today, rather than waiting for a complete overhaul. Yes, Neetuji, do you want to share something? Okay. Okay, Bhavna ji, thank you. Thank you so much for joining. Grateful to you as well. Thank you, Renu Thakshi ji, for joining as well. We are also interested in IKS, me, Dr. Pratibha, Dr. Vikas, and it was just very good to bring this forth to all of you. And I think maybe, I'm very sure that some of you know much more about IKS than three of us. So the true spirit of IKS is that we keep sharing, we keep helping each other. That is the true spirit of our knowledge systems. We don't keep knowledge confined and packed in our own hands, in our own systems. We are always open to sharing and learning. If we are able to do that, then we can truly implement IKS in the way it was envisioned. Yes, okay. Sorry, I also did have the desire to share some sources about IKS. I have multiple web resources that I could share, but it's just the lack of time that didn't let me do it. So thank you, Arpit ji, for sharing this website. I'll copy it for all of us and I'll put it in the group. And in any case, if any of you do want some specific material, please feel free to reach out to me on mobile and I'll be most happy to share it. You will anyways get it when you receive your certificates. But if you need anything additional and specific, yeah, just let me know and I'll try to get that for you. Also, if that day I don't think some of you may have missed, we have a WhatsApp group, IKS Research Enthusiasts. It's a collective of now about more than 300 people, scholars, researchers, academicians, faculty members, some practitioners also. And it's like a one-stop update center for IKS events, FDPs, conferences, webinars, opportunities, internships, projects, and collaborations. So I had shared the WhatsApp group link there, but I think there's some issue with Google Meet settings, so some of you were not able to click it. So any of you who wants to join the group, it's an open group, sharing group. If you want to join it, just please send me a DM and I will have you added to the group. Yes, for the WhatsApp group link, please reach out to me on direct message. The feedback form link I will definitely share immediately as we close the meeting. Great. So anything else? Great. So let's call it a day. Okay, just one more. I wanted a list of IKS-based research journals. Yes, Arpitji, that is also possible. I have not made any effort to compile this list at one place. It's a scattered list that I have, but now that you have requested, I will try to at least put at least 10 journals in the WhatsApp group. So yes, thank you for reminding me. I will try to do that. Professor Girishwar Mishra, book on Indian psychology. Professor Paranjpe, book on psychology in the Indian tradition. That's great. Thank you for sharing these resources. Meetuji, thank you so much. So namaste everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It's nice to be part of this collective. Wish you all the very best for your academic and research endeavors, and may we continue to remain committed to good teaching, good research, good value transfer to our students, and may we continue to pursue IKS in the most earnest and sincere way. Namaste, everyone. Thank you.